So let's revise the representations just for a moment. Entity type is represented by a rectangle. An attribute is represented by an oval. Okay. Now let's understand what is a domain of an attribute. Domain of attribute. Domain basically tells me what are the set of permitted values that an attribute can have. So I'll just write it down. It is the set of permitted values. So when I say a phone number, I would define its domain as, say I'm talking about mobile numbers which are 10 digits, then the domain of phone number is the set of 10-digit numbers. Domain works basically as a constraint on the value. It's a constraint on the value of the attribute. Okay, when I say the domain is 10-digit number, then I cannot have a phone number which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Because this is a 6-digit number. So it's not allowed. So we've covered domain of an attribute. Now we'll look at types of attributes. First type is a simple attribute. Or we'll rather look at it in this way. It's a simple or, not or, it's a simple versus a composite attribute, okay? An attribute is either composite or simple, okay? When an attribute in itself can be divided into other attributes, okay? Like we have an address. So the address can have a flat number, it can have a location, it can have a city, it can have a state, right? So such attributes which themselves can be bifurcated into other attributes, other simpler attributes, are called as composite attributes. So address is a composite attribute and a flat number is a simple attribute. A location is a simple attribute. A city is a simple attribute. We cannot go any further, right? A city cannot have a sub-city and a sub-sub-city, right? A city is a city. A sub-city would be a location that in itself is a simple attribute. Okay? Had we looked at it in this way, if we didn't had this, we probably had just a city, and city would be bifurcated into a location. So in that case, city would be a composite attribute. It would have a city, location and area, something like that. So we've taken a look at what is a simple attribute and what is a composite attribute. Now we'll see how a composite attribute is represented. Okay, so it's simple. It's represented like this. Address will be the attribute which is composite, and it is composed of, we'll write it like this, it is composed of a flat number, of a location, of a city, and a state. Okay, and this is the attribute of person. Right? This way we represent a composite attribute. Composite attribute is something that can be further divided into a simple attribute or a set of simple attributes. Next we come to a single valued attribute versus a multi-valued attribute. So when I use versus, what I mean is an attribute can only be either single valued or multi-valued. It cannot be both, right? It can be either composite or simple. It cannot be both. So let's suppose our attribute phone number. A person can have any number of phone numbers, right? It can have 2 mobile numbers, it can have 0 mobile number, it can have a mobile number and a landline number. There are so many different possibilities. So in that case, we say that phone number is multi-valued. It has many values. It can be more than 0 or more than 1. In both the cases, it is called as multi-valued. It may happen that it doesn't have any value at all. There may be some person who lives on the street who doesn't even have a landline number, let alone a mobile number, right? So we're talking about greater than equal to 0. Let's see how we represent a multi-valued attribute. A multi-valued attribute is represented as a double oval. That's the way to do it. This is a multi-valued attribute. Person has 0 or more phone numbers. Okay? Next we'll see what is a derived attribute. Derived attribute. Derived versus stored attribute. Okay. Let's suppose we have a date of birth attribute. From this attribute, we can at any time find out the age of the person, right? So from current time, if we subtract current date, if we subtract the date of birth, we would get the age. There is a set mathematical formula to do that, right? So in such cases, we say age is a derived attribute. And date of birth is a stored attribute. Just keep in mind, date of birth is a stored as well as a simple, as well as a single valued attribute, right? Single valued. So how do we represent a derived attribute? It is via a dotted oval. So we have the person and we have his age or her age, if you will. That's the representation of a derived attribute.